Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin.
The wine glass shattered against the marble floor like my marriage. Sudden, loud, and impossible to piece back together. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the kiss that ruined everything. I'd rather kiss my dog than dance with you another second, Eli. Sophia's voice cut through the jazz music and champagne chatter like a blade through silk. Every conversation in our living room stopped. Every pair of eyes turned toward us, standing there on the makeshift dance floor she'd insisted on creating for her little soiree. I'm Eli Quinn, 42 years old, and up until that moment, I thought I knew my wife. Built custom homes for a living, served 6 years in the Navy before that, and considered myself pretty good at reading people and situations. But standing there in my own house, surrounded by her friends who'd never liked me anyway, I realized I'd been blind for years. Excuse me? I kept my voice level, though my grip tightened on her waist. Sophia smiled that practiced smile she'd perfected during her brief modeling career. You heard me? Baxter has better rhythm than you do. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Her friends, Callie, Jade, and Vanessa, practically glowed with delight. These were women who spent their days at yoga classes and charity lunches, married to men who actually made money instead of just building houses for people who did. I glanced over at Mason Carter, Sophia's boss at the real estate firm. He stood by the fireplace, nursing a scotch and watching our humiliation with undisguised satisfaction. Mason was everything I wasn't. Smooth, wealthy, connected. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and never got dirt under his fingernails. Well, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you'll be kissing the doors of my house when I throw you out of it. The room went completely silent. Sophia's face went white, then red. Her mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. Try me. I walked away from her, through the crowd of her shocked friends, and out onto the back deck. The October air was crisp, carrying the salt smell of the ocean from 2 miles away. I'd built this house with my own hands, every beam and board carefully chosen and placed. The deck overlooked the garden where Sophia grew the roses she was so proud of. Ryan Murphy, my oldest friend and the only person at this party who'd actually wanted to be here, followed me outside. Jesus, Eli, that was intense. She's been building up to this for months. I said, pulling out my phone to check messages. Anything to keep my hands busy. I just didn't want to see it. Building up to what? I looked back through the sliding glass doors. Sophia was surrounded by her friends, all of them talking at once, their hands gesturing dramatically. Mason had moved closer to the group, playing the concerned boss, comforting his employee, to getting rid of me. Ryan followed my gaze. You think she's cheating? I think she's been cheating for a while. Tonight was just her way of making it public. The thing about humiliation is that it clarifies everything. All those late nights at the office, the new jewelry she claimed was from clients, the way she'd started flinching when I touched her, it all made sense now. What are you going to do? I watched Mason put his hand on Sophia's shoulder, saw the way she leaned into him just slightly. I'm going to remind her why she married me in the first place, which was because I saved her from living in her car. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. What? She never told you? When I met Sophia at that charity auction 5 years ago, she was 3 days away from being evicted, broke, desperate, and willing to do anything to change her situation, including marry a guy who owned his own business and had money in the bank. And you knew this? I knew she needed help. I thought she loved me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out she just loved what I could provide. The house, the stability, the respectability. Eli, man, maybe you're reading too much into, she signed a prenup, Ryan, a very detailed prenup that my lawyer insisted on. She was so eager to get married, so desperate to secure her future, that she barely read it. The sliding door opened behind us. Callie stepped out, her designer heels clicking on the deck boards I'd laid myself. Eli, honey, Sophia's really upset. Maybe you should apologize. Callie was the ringleader of Sophia's little group, a woman who'd married well and spent her time making sure everyone knew it. She'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow felt qualified to give advice on everything from politics to parenting. Apologize for what, exactly? For embarrassing her in front of everyone. That was really cruel, what you said about throwing her out. Was it crueler than her comparing me to a dog in front of a room full of people? Callie's expression shifted. She was just joking around. You know how Sophia is. No, actually, I'm starting to realize I don't know how Sophia is at all. I walked past her, back into the house. The party was winding down, guests making polite excuses and heading for the door. Sophia stood in the foyer, playing the wounded wife perfectly. She'd always been good at performing. Eli, we need to talk, she said as the last guest left. Do we? What you said tonight was completely inappropriate. These are my friends, my colleagues. Mason was here. Yeah, I noticed how concerned Mason was about your feelings. Her cheeks flushed. He's my boss. This could affect my job. Your job, I nodded slowly. Right. The job that keeps you at the office until 10 o'clock 3 nights a week. The job that requires so many weekend conferences and client dinners. I work hard, Eli. Just because you don't understand the real estate business doesn't mean I understand it just fine. I also understand that Mason Carter has been divorced for 6 months and suddenly needs a lot more personal attention from his employees. The color drained from her face. You're being paranoid. Am I? Then you won't mind if I start paying more attention to your work schedule. Maybe I'll surprise you at the office sometime. Bring you dinner during one of those late nights. Don't you dare show up at my workplace and embarrass me, like you embarrassed me tonight. She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. I'm going to bed. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you've calmed down. I watched her walk up the stairs I'd built, her hand trailing along the banister I'd carved myself. Everything in this house was my work, my sweat, my vision made real. She'd picked out paint colors and furniture, but the bones of this place were mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. You okay, man? I typed back, getting there. But I wasn't okay. I was angry, humiliated, and beginning to understand just how thoroughly I'd been played. Sophia had married me for security, used me to build the life she wanted, and now that she'd found someone who could offer her more, she was ready to trade up. The problem with that plan was the prenup she'd signed without reading. The prenup that made it very clear that in the event of adultery, she'd leave this marriage with exactly what she'd brought to it. Nothing. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Tomorrow, I'd start building something new. Not a house this time, but a trap. And Sophia was going to walk right into it. 3 days after the party, I was sitting in my truck outside the Riverside Hotel at 2 p.m, watching my wife have lunch with her boss. They'd chosen a corner table by the window, and from my vantage point in the parking lot, I could see Mason leaning across the table, his hand covering hers. This is really happening, I muttered to myself, taking photos with my phone. I'd spent the past 72 hours paying attention to things I'd been ignoring for months. Sophia's phone habits, her schedule, the way she dressed for work versus how she dressed for me. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking. My phone rang. Ryan, where are you? You missed our lunch. Conducting surveillance. Jesus, Eli. You're not a cop. No, but I know someone who used to be. Dale Morrison had worked with me on a few construction projects after he retired from the police force. Now he ran a small private investigation business, mostly insurance fraud and cheating spouses. He was discreet, thorough, and owed me a favor from when I'd helped him renovate his office. You want me to tail your wife? Dale asked when I called him that evening. I want documentation, photos, times, places, everything admissible in court. Court? Eli, most couples work this stuff out in mediation. Most couples don't have the prenup we have. Dale whistled low. Infidelity clause? Among other things. She cheats, she gets nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no claim on the business. She leaves with whatever she can carry. And she signed this? Eagerly. She was so focused on the wedding, on becoming Mrs. Quinn, that she never bothered to read the fine print. What do you need from me? Proof. Solid, undeniable proof that holds up in court. Dale was good at his job. Within a week, I had a file thick enough to choke a horse. Photos of Sophia and Mason at restaurants, hotels, his apartment, credit card receipts showing purchases she'd never mentioned, a paper trail of lies stretching back 8 months. But it wasn't enough. I didn't just want to divorce Sophia. I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd thrown away. I wanted Mason to realize he'd picked a fight with the wrong man. And I wanted her friends to see what happened when you treated people like they were disposable. The opportunity came at the Autumn Gala, the biggest social event of the year in our little coastal city. Sophia had been planning her outfit for months, talking about how important it was for her career to be seen at the right events with the right people. "Are you sure you want to go?" she asked the morning of the gala, adjusting her earrings in the bedroom mirror. "You always say these things bore you." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, straightening my tie. "I'm looking forward to seeing all your friends again." Something in my tone made her pause. "Eli, about the other night, don't worry about it. Water under the bridge." But it wasn't water under the bridge. It was gasoline, and I was about to light a match. The gala was held at the country club, the same place where Sophia and I had gotten married. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent the cocktail hour mingling, being charming, making sure everyone saw me being the perfect husband. Mason arrived fashionably late, as always. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and slapping backs. When he reached Sophia, he kissed her cheek and let his hand linger on her waist just a fraction too long. "Eli," he said, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you again. Mason, how's business?" "Booming. We're closing more deals than we can handle. Sophia's been invaluable." "I bet she has." His smile faltered slightly. "She's very dedicated, puts in long hours." "So I've noticed." The dinner was the usual rubber chicken affair, followed by speeches from local politicians and charity organizers. I waited until the dancing started, until everyone was relaxed and the wine had been flowing freely. Then I made my move. Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking the microphone from the surprise DJ, "I hope you don't mind if I interrupt for just a moment." The crowd turned toward me, curious. I saw Sophia at our table, her face pale with confusion. "My wife Sophia and I are celebrating our 5th anniversary this year, and I wanted to share some memories with all of you. After all, you're our friends and family." I nodded to Ryan, who was operating the laptop connected to the projection system. The first image appeared on the screen behind me. Sophia and Mason at the Riverside Hotel, his hand on her thigh under the table. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Sophia shot to her feet, her chair falling backward. "The thing about memories," I continued, "is that they tell a story. This one, for example, was taken last Tuesday during what Sophia told me was a client meeting. The next photo showed them kissing in the parking lot of Mason's apartment building. And this one was from last weekend, when Sophia said she was at a real estate conference in Portland. Mason was pushing through the crowd toward me, his face red with rage. "You son of a witch!" Now, Mason, let me finish. I have so many wonderful memories to share." The final photo was the money shot, Mason and Sophia in his apartment window, silhouetted against the light, clearly engaged in activities that had nothing to do with real estate. "The beautiful thing about love," I said as Mason reached the stage, "is that it's always honest, always true, always faithful." Mason swung at me, I ducked, and his momentum carried him past me into the drum kit. The crash was spectacular. "Oops," I said into the microphone. "Looks like Mason's having trouble with his balance. Maybe it's all that guilt weighing him down." Security was moving toward the stage now, but I was done anyway. I handed the microphone back to the DJ and walked calmly through the crowd. People parted like the Red Sea, their faces a mixture of shock and fascination. Sophia caught up with me in the parking lot. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Do what? Tell the truth? You've ruined everything, my career, my reputation." "Your reputation was ruined the moment you decided to cheat on your husband. I just made sure everyone knew about it. This isn't over, Eli. I'll take you for everything you have." I pulled a copy of our prenup from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. "You might want to read this, especially page 7, section 3, subsection A, the part about adultery and forfeiture of all marital assets." Her hands shook as she unfolded the document. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. You signed it, Sophia, in front of witnesses. You agreed that if you cheated, you'd leave with nothing. I was young, I was scared. You were desperate, and you thought you could use me as a stepping stone to something better. Well, congratulations, you found something better. Now you get to enjoy it without any of the things I provided." I got in my truck and drove home, leaving her standing in the parking lot in her $1,000 dress, finally understanding what she'd really signed up for. But this was just the beginning. Humiliating Sophia and Mason publicly was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. They'd made me look like a fool in my own house, in front of people who were supposed to respect me. They'd plotted behind my back, laughed at me, treated me like I was too stupid to notice what was happening right in front of me. Now they were going to learn what happened when you underestimated Eli Quinn. The divorce papers were served at Sophia's favorite brunch spot on a sunny Saturday morning. I'd made sure to time it perfectly, right when she'd be holding court with Callie, Jade, and Vanessa, dissecting the previous night's social events over mimosas and eggs Benedict. I wasn't there to see it personally, but Ryan was. He'd positioned himself at the bar with a clear view of their table, nursing a Bloody Mary and pretending to watch the football game on the overhead TV. It was beautiful, he told me later. The process server walked right up to their table, asked Sophia Quinn, and when she nodded, he handed her the papers and said, "You've been served." She went white as a sheet. What did her friends do? That's the best part. They all started reading over her shoulder, and you could see their faces change as they realized what was happening. Callie actually got up and moved to another table. The rats were abandoning ship. Good. That had been part of my plan. The divorce papers were just the opening move, though. While Sophia was dealing with the legal reality of her situation, I was implementing phase 2 of my revenge. Mason Carter thought he was untouchable. He had money, connections, and the kind of arrogance that comes from never having to face real consequences for his actions. But everyone has vulnerabilities, and I'd spent the past 2 weeks finding his. His weakness was his ex-wife, Gina. I'd done my research on Mason's divorce, which had been finalized just 8 months ago. Gina Carter had gotten a decent settlement, but she'd also gotten a front-row seat to her husband's pattern of infidelity. When I called her and suggested we meet for coffee, she was more than willing to talk. He cheated on me with 3 different women during our marriage, Gina told me, stirring sugar into her latte. That I know of. There were probably others. Gina was an attractive woman in her early 40s, well-dressed and intelligent, the kind of woman who deserved better than Mason Carter. I'm sorry you went through that. Are you? Because from what I hear, you're going through the same thing now. Word travels fast. Honey, after that stunt you pulled at the gala, you're the talk of the town. Half the people think you're a hero, the other half think you're crazy. What do you think? She smiled. I think Mason finally picked the wrong man's wife to screw around with. Gina had information I could use, financial records from their divorce proceedings, details about Mason's business practices, and most importantly, evidence of his pattern of using his position to seduce employees and clients. He did the same thing to me, she explained. I was working as a receptionist at his first real estate office when we met. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world. Then, after we got married, I found out he'd slept with half the women who worked for him. Why didn't you report him? To who? He owns the company, and back then I was too embarrassed, too ashamed. I thought it was my fault somehow. It wasn't. I know that now. But it took me years to figure it out. I left that meeting with a flash drive full of information and a new ally in my war against Mason Carter. But I still needed to deal with Sophia's friends, the women who'd watched her humiliate me and cheered her on. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Callie Morrison, no relation to Dale despite the shared last name, had hired me to build a custom wine cellar in her basement 6 months ago. The project was nearly finished, just some final touches and inspections remaining. She'd been dodging my calls since the gala, probably hoping I'd just go away. I showed up at her house on Monday morning with my crew, ready to complete the work. Eli, she said, answering the door in yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt. I wasn't expecting you today. Really? Because we scheduled this finish work 3 weeks ago. Unless you'd prefer to leave your wine cellar half completed? She looked uncomfortable, which was exactly how I wanted her to feel. Maybe we should postpone. Postpone. Callie, I've got a crew here, materials loaded and a schedule to keep. Besides, you still owe me $15,000 for the work we've already completed. Her face went pale. $15,000? Did you forget? The balance is due on completion, which is today. I handed her the invoice. She stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. I'll need to talk to my husband. Of course. Take your time. We'll just get started on the finish work while you figure out your payment situation. My crew and I spent the next 4 hours in Callie's basement, installing wine racks and putting the final touches on what was admittedly beautiful work. But the whole time, I could hear her upstairs on the phone, her voice getting more strained with each conversation. When we finished, she was waiting in the kitchen with a check. Here, she said, not meeting my eyes. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you, Callie. I hope you enjoy your wine cellar. Eli, about Sophia, what about her? Maybe you two could work things out. I mean, everyone makes mistakes. I looked at her for a long moment. You're right. Everyone does make mistakes. Sophia made the mistake of thinking I was too stupid to notice what was happening. Mason made the mistake of thinking I was too weak to fight back. And you made the mistake of thinking you could treat me like garbage in my own house, and I'd just take it. You laughed, Callie. When Sophia compared me to a dog, you laughed. When she humiliated me in front of a room full of people, you thought it was hilarious. It was just a joke. No, it wasn't. It was cruelty. And now you're all finding out what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I left her standing in her kitchen, check in hand, finally understanding that actions have consequences. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Mason had been laying low since the gala, probably hoping the scandal would blow over. He'd underestimated how much people love gossip in a small town and how long they remember public humiliations. I'd heard through the grapevine that he was struggling to close deals, that clients were having second thoughts about working with him. His reputation was taking a beating, but I wanted to make sure the damage was permanent. That's when I remembered the construction project. Mason had been trying to get the contract for a luxury housing development on the north side of town for months. It was a $50 million project that would cement his reputation as the premier real estate developer in the area. The only problem was that the project needed someone to handle the actual construction, and there weren't many contractors in town with the experience and reputation to handle something that big. Someone like me, for instance. I'd been approached about the project months ago, but had turned it down because I was too busy with smaller jobs. Now suddenly I was very interested. The meeting with the development company was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a portfolio of my previous work. Mr. Quinn, the project manager said, shaking my hand. I have to admit, I was surprised when you called. I thought you weren't interested in large-scale projects. My situation has changed recently. I'm looking to expand my business. We spent an hour going over plans, timelines, and budgets. I could handle the job, and we both knew it. The question was whether they wanted to work with me, given all the recent drama. I have to ask, the project manager said finally. There's been some talk around town about your personal situation. We're concerned about potential complications. You mean my divorce? Among other things. I leaned back in my chair. Let me ask you something. Do you want this project completed on time, on budget, and to the highest possible standards? Of course. Then you want me. My personal life is my personal life, but my professional reputation speaks for itself. I've never missed a deadline, never gone over budget, and never delivered substandard work. And Mason Carter? What about him? He's been telling people that working with you would be a mistake, that you're unstable, unreliable. I smiled. Mason Carter is sleeping with my wife and trying to steal my business. Of course he doesn't want you to hire me. The question is, do you make business decisions based on the recommendations of people with obvious conflicts of interest? The contract was mine by the end of the week. Mason found out Monday morning when the announcement was published in the local business journal. By Monday afternoon, he was calling my office, leaving increasingly angry voicemails. You son of a witch, his final message said. That was my project. You stole it out from under me. I called him back. Mason, good to hear from you. How's business? You know perfectly well how business is. You cost me $50 million. I didn't cost you anything. You cost yourself when you decided to sleep with my wife and then brag about it to anyone who'd listen. This isn't over, Quinn. You're right, it's not. But Mason had made a crucial error. He'd threatened me, and he'd done it over the phone, leaving a recorded message on my business line. Dale had been monitoring my communications as part of the divorce proceedings, and Mason's threat was now documented evidence, which was going to come in very handy for what I had planned next. Mason made his move on a Tuesday night in November. I was working late in my shop, putting finishing touches on some custom cabinets, when I heard the sound of breaking glass from the house. I'd been expecting this. Mason was the type of man who'd never been told no, never been outmaneuvered, never been made to look foolish in public. The business contract had been the last straw, and I'd known he'd eventually do something stupid. I just hadn't expected him to be quite this stupid. I found him in my living room, standing over the shattered remains of a picture frame that had held a photo of Sophia and me from our honeymoon. He'd clearly been drinking. I could smell the whiskey from across the room. Hello, Mason. He spun around, swaying slightly. Quinn, we need to talk. Breaking into someone's house is an interesting conversation starter. You've ruined everything. My business, my reputation, my relationship with Sophia. Your relationship with Sophia was my relationship with Sophia. You just forgot that part. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You think you're so smart, don't you? With your little slideshow and your legal tricks. Smart enough to install security cameras last month. His face went white. What? I pointed to the small camera mounted in the corner of the room, its red recording light blinking steadily. Say hello to the nice police officers who will be watching this later. You can't. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, criminal trespass. That's just for starters. Add in the threatening phone calls you've been leaving, and you're looking at some serious charges. Mason looked around the room like a trapped animal. I'll tell them you invited me over. That we got into a fight. With what? The glass you broke is from the outside, Mason. The lock you jimmied is on the front door. And the cameras caught you breaking in 20 minutes ago. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. The security app displayed 4 different camera angles, all clearly showing his illegal entry into my house. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to sit down on that couch and wait for the police to arrive. You're going to confess to everything, and you're going to stay away from me, my property, and my business from now on. And if I don't, then I release the other footage. What other footage? I smiled. The footage from the cameras I installed in Sophia's car 3 weeks ago. His face went from white to green. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. The car is registered in my name, purchased with my money, and insured under my policy. I have every legal right to monitor my own property. You're bluffing. I played a video clip on my phone. The audio was crystal clear. Mason and Sophia discussing their plans to frame me for domestic violence, complete with fake bruises and a fabricated police report. They'd planned to use the false charges to void the prenup and take everything I owned. Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false police report, perjury, I said, counting on my fingers. That's on top of the adultery, which voids Sophia's claim to any marital assets. You two really thought this through, didn't you? Mason collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. We never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just never expected to get caught. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I met them at the door with copies of the security footage and a detailed statement of events. Mason didn't resist arrest. He was too busy trying to figure out how his perfect plan had fallen apart. But the night wasn't over yet. Sophia arrived just as the police car was pulling away, Mason handcuffed in the back seat. She looked like she'd been crying for hours, her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. Eli, please, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about. Mason told me what happened. This has gone too far. Has it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like it's gone exactly as far as it needed to go. She followed me into the house, stepping carefully around the broken glass. I know you're angry. Angry? I laughed. Sophia, I'm not angry. Angry was 3 weeks ago. Now I'm just disappointed. In me? In myself. For not seeing what you really were from the beginning. She sat down on the couch, in the same spot where Mason had been sitting minutes before. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did. You and Mason planned to destroy my life, take everything I've worked for, and leave me with nothing. You were going to file false charges against me, lie to the police, commit perjury in court. You absolutely meant to hurt me. We were desperate. You were greedy. There's a difference. I sat down across from her, studying her face. Even now, even after everything, she was beautiful. But it was a cold beauty, like a perfect sculpture with no warmth behind the eyes. Do you want to know the really sad part? I asked. What? If you'd just asked for a divorce, I probably would have given you something. Not half of everything, not what you'd get from Mason, but enough to start over. I'm not a cruel man, Sophia. You're not? No. But I'm not a stupid one either. And I don't forgive people who try to destroy me. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the broken glass on the floor. What happens now? Now you pack your things and leave. Tonight, you can take whatever clothes and personal items you brought to this marriage, but everything else stays here. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Maybe Mason's place, when he gets out on bail. Maybe back to that car you were living in when I met you. Her head snapped up. You traitor. There she is, the real Sophia. I was wondering when she'd show up. She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. You think you've won, don't you? I know I have. This isn't over. Yes, it is. It's been over since the moment you decided to cheat on me. Everything that's happened since then has just been the consequences catching up with you. She stormed upstairs to pack, slamming doors and throwing things around. I didn't care. Let her have her tantrum. In an hour, she'd be gone, and I'd have my house back. My phone rang. It was Dale. I heard about Mason's arrest. You okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. The divorce should be straightforward now. With the adultery evidence and the conspiracy charges, she won't have any legal standing to contest the prenup. Good. How long? 6 weeks, maybe less. Depends on whether she tries to fight it. She won't fight it. She can't afford to. After Sophia left, I walked through the house, checking each room to make sure she hadn't taken anything that wasn't hers. She'd been surprisingly honest, taking only her clothes and a few pieces of jewelry I'd given her over the years. I found myself standing in the bedroom we'd shared for 5 years, looking at the space where her dresser had been. The room felt bigger somehow, like a weight had been lifted from it. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Heard about Mason? You okay? I typed back, never better. And I meant it. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The man who'd built this house with his own hands, who'd served his country with honor, who'd never backed down from a fight when he was in the right. Sophia and Mason had made the mistake of thinking I was weak because I was kind, stupid because I was trusting. They'd learned the difference between those things the hard way. But there was still one more lesson to teach. The trial was set for a cold Monday morning in February. Mason was facing charges for breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and destruction of property. The conspiracy charges had been dropped as part of a plea agreement, but he was still looking at potential jail time. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder full of documentation. The local media was there. Our little drama had captured the town's attention, and everyone wanted to see how it would end. Sophia was there too, sitting in the back row with what remained of her social circle. Callie, Jade, and Vanessa had mostly abandoned her, but a few hangers-on remained, probably hoping to witness the final act of our very public divorce. Mason's lawyer was an expensive-looking man from the city, the kind who charged by the hour and promised miracles. He spent 20 minutes trying to paint Mason as the victim of a vindictive husband's revenge plot. My client made a mistake, he told the jury. A moment of poor judgment brought on by emotional distress and alcohol consumption, but the punishment Mr. Quinn has orchestrated far exceeds the crime. When it was time for my victim impact statement, I stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom. I'd been thinking about what to say for weeks, but now that the moment was here, the words came easily. Your Honor, Mason Carter didn't just break into my house that night. He broke into my life months ago when he decided to pursue my wife. He broke my trust, my marriage, and my peace of mind. I turned to look at Mason, who was staring at the table in front of him. But the thing about breaking something is that sometimes it reveals what was rotten underneath. My marriage was rotten. My wife was dishonest and unfaithful. Mason Carter actually did me a favor by exposing the truth. I faced the judge again. I don't want revenge, Your Honor. I want justice. I want consequences. I want Mason Carter to understand that actions have repercussions, that you can't just take what belongs to other people and expect to get away with it. Mason was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, suspended to 30 days with community service and restitution. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He'd have a criminal record, his real estate license would be reviewed, and his reputation was permanently damaged. More importantly, everyone in town now knew exactly what kind of man he was. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Sophia got exactly what the prenup specified. Nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no claim on my business or assets. She left the marriage with the same thing she'd brought to it, a suitcase full of clothes and a lot of debt. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to Portland, trying to start over in a city where no one knew her story. Mason had lost most of his clients and was struggling to keep his business afloat. As for her friends, they'd learned a valuable lesson about loyalty and consequences. Callie had tried to hire another contractor to finish some work on her house, but word had gotten around about how she'd treated me. She'd ended up having to pay twice my rate to get someone to take the job. 6 months after the trial, I was working in my shop when Ryan stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and a grin. Guess who I saw at the grocery store today? Who? Jade Morrison. She asked about you. What did she want? To know if you were seeing anyone. Apparently she's getting divorced and thought you might be interested. I laughed. What did you tell her? I told her you were too smart to make the same mistake twice. Good answer. We sat on the deck I'd built, drinking beer and watching the sun set over the garden where Sophia used to grow her roses. I'd torn out the rose bushes and planted vegetables instead. More practical, less pretentious. Any regrets? Ryan asked. I thought about it for a moment. About the marriage? No. Sophia showed me who she really was, and I'm grateful for that lesson, even if it was expensive. About the revenge? It wasn't revenge. It was justice. There's a difference, is there? Revenge is about hurting people because they hurt you. Justice is about making sure people face the consequences of their choices. And you think that's what you did? I know it is. Sophia chose to cheat. Mason chose to pursue a married woman. They both chose to try to destroy me when they got caught. I just made sure their choices had consequences. Ryan nodded, understanding. What's next? I keep building houses. I keep living my life. I keep being the man I've always been, just a little wiser. And if someone tries to take advantage of you again? I smiled, thinking about the security system I'd installed, the legal protections I'd put in place, the network of allies I'd cultivated during the whole ordeal. They'll find out that I'm not as easy a target as I used to be. The construction project that had caused Mason so much grief was nearly finished. $50 million worth of luxury homes, all built to my specifications and standards. The success of that project had brought me more work than I could handle. Referrals from satisfied clients who appreciated quality craftsmanship. My business was thriving, my reputation was stronger than ever, and my personal life was exactly what I wanted it to be. Quiet, peaceful, and drama-free. Sometimes people ask me if I missed being married and I was lonely in that big house by myself. The answer was simple. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who didn't value what I brought to the relationship. Sophia had taught me that love without respect is worthless, that trust once broken can never be fully repaired, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who don't appreciate you. Mason had taught me that bullies only respect strength, that reputation matters more than money, and that patience and planning beat anger and impulse every time. Together, they'd taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that I was stronger than I thought, smarter than they assumed, and absolutely capable of protecting myself when necessary. As the sun disappeared behind the trees and Ryan headed home to his own family, I sat alone on my deck, surrounded by the house I'd built with my own hands, listening to the sound of the ocean in the distance. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the life I wanted. And no one, not Sophia, not Mason, not anyone, was ever going to take that away from me again.